Hey everyone, this is essentially the final video for the Apex STO build here. I may make another video on this once I get it back from CES if there's some additional questions on how things are done, etc. For those of you that have watched part 1 and part 2, you have a general idea what I was aiming for and how things kind of came to be. Unfortunately, for those that watched those parts, I was not able to do the roof scoop in the way I wanted to, so I ended up doing the kind of logo plate that you probably saw in the beginning of the B-roll. By the time you guys see this video, this thing would have already been in a suitcase, in a Pelican case, and on its way to Vegas. All right, so with that said, for those of you that are new here, this build is, quick recap, inspired by the Huracan STO, right? This is the press color of orange and blue. So that was kind of the inspiration to draw for the build itself. So now on this build, I tried not to directly take from the car. I tried to do elements that are inspired by the vehicle, as well as kind of go with some of the design elements that are very key Lamborghini. Okay, that being hexagons, Ys, etc. like that. Stuff like that, that pretty much every car fan, if you are one, you kind of understand how Lamborghini incorporates these things. So let's just quickly go over all the mods and so forth from the front, and I'll do a conclusion on my overall experience putting this together. All right. So I really, apologize for the rush and probably some of the bad lighting. But anyways, here we have the front. This is the 360 Overkill grille that's been powder coated to just orange. This I believe is called, the blue here is, they're both prismatic. I think this is called baby blue, not baby blue, still blue or something like that. But it is the light blue from prismatic. Most of the hardware has been powder coated to the blue. So inside this fan grille, we have carbon fiber aesthetic inserts. I added Lamborghini grill. I added Lamborghini logo, just really for the sake of it. Not that I really needed to, but I felt, yeah, why not, right? So on the back side, there's nothing really. It's just, the carbon fiber wrapped back of the reservoir, and I have the motherboard tray cover also powder coated in blue. I'm actually using the factory glass on the back. I'm using, as you guys saw in the B-roll, a piece of acrylic cut with hexagon pattern as a partial glass. The purpose of that being is I want to give folks somewhat of a mental barrier to not touch while it's sitting at the LAN event and then while it's sitting at Alphacool. Hopefully that kind of works, right? Additionally, in the front, I've removed the IO. So I've pretty much now put the Apex STO there. Hold on, let me zoom out a little bit, guys. Okay, so I put the Apex STO there, kind of color matching, just to kind of tie it all together. On the top, I have my logo, because I had to pop out the OC button for powder coating. The top logo pattern, the logo plate is actually just aluminum that I CNC'd out with the logo, and it's been powder coated, and sitting below it is a fluorescent orange acrylic layer, which when the light hits it, it looks like it's lighting up, but it's actually not. It may not come across on camera all too well. So this situation right here is the brake caliper distro. This thing is the distro with the 3D printed covers on the outside and on the inside. Now, if you're wondering, this doesn't look exactly like a current Brembo brake caliper from Lamborghinis because I chose not to do that. Reason I've stated previously is that the current generation Brembos, I think maybe not some of the ceramics, they look like giant tacos. All right, so I kind of took the slightly older Brembo design and incorporated the newer design, which is why it's more curved over here. For those that are interested, these are 3D printed parts, the front and the outside. The outside and the one on the inside. Obviously, they were joined together and then post-processed. I like to use wood filler for the seams, and then so quick overview of my process. I'm not a pro at this, but I'll tell you my process. So first, to join these two pieces together, I use SCI GRIP 16. I'll put a link in the comments. That's really good for bonding acrylics, but I found that it bonds PLA extremely well. This is PLA. Now, if you're wondering why I use PLA and not ABS, I'll tell you why. ABS shrinks when it prints, which isn't a big deal. Technically, you can calculate it, but every single type of ABS filament will have a different level of shrinkage. So considering I have to have a tight fit over my distro plate, I don't want to play that game, right? PLA, there is a slight shrinkage, but it's very minimal for the most part, right? So that's why I print in PLA. And obviously you can post-process PLA like you can do with ABS. This is not the world's best job because I did it in a rush, but as you can see, it's still pretty smooth. This is essentially bonded here with a side grip 16. I take wood filler to go over the gaps. I mix wood filler and acetone, and that kind of helps it dry out extremely quickly. And then anything else, I just use like Bondo spot putty, right? Stage 2. And then sand that down, and then I put a primer coat, sand that down, and then I put another primer coat, and then I use pretty much, this is Cretex Orange. I forgot which one. I think it's just, I don't remember which Cretex Orange it is. It's Cretex Orange. And then on top of that, it is actually just rattle can clear coat that I wet sanded afterwards and then polished. So it's not a 2K clear. I had considered using a 2K clear, but once again, it's very hard to find an auto body shop around me that was going to willing to spray 3D printed parts. And it's winter, so I can't do it outside on my own. So with that said, moving on, these logos are to replace kind of the mimic the screws and bolts. I put the logos of the sponsors for this build, ROG, Alphacool, and then my logo. Cable Mod is also part of this, so is Gskill, but well, they kind of came afterwards, so I already had the design. I didn't have much space. These are actually real metal screws holding it together as well. Now, once we come to the main part, all right, so on the inside, these are all running to this distro plate. They're bent in a 90 afterwards. I just kind of wanted to go for that straight pipe look. I originally was going to use clear tubing, and then it just figured this looks kind of high. It looks high end, right? I hope it does. And clear tubing, in my opinion, just kind of looks cheap, right? I mean, not that all builds of clear tubing look cheap. It's just it didn't match the aesthetic I was going after. I was going to think carbon fiber tube. I had that planned out. Speaking of which, I even powder coated carbon fiber tube, and it actually works really well. If you let it bake for 15 minutes and that's it, it actually works extremely well. So I didn't have time to implement it here, and it would have looked too dark, but next time, guys, carbon fiber tube powder coated, get ready. All right, so these runs are in serial. I originally actually made this in a parallel format, and it didn't work. Right? Surprisingly, it didn't work. I guess the CPU block pressure was just too much, and it wouldn't go into the block at all. It filled the GPU just fine, but the CPU was just dying, right? And aside from that, it's going to be hard to see, but on the RAM sticks, I powder coated those blue too, and then I put my own logo instead of the Gskill strip, the Trident Z strip. And this is actually an EK bracket that's been powder coated in orange. Like I said before, I don't have the pro version of this case, therefore I don't have the stock vertical mount, which I also don't think is that attractive looking. But worked out for me, and no one can tell it's an EK bracket unless you know what you're looking at. In the back, I have a screen that's connected by USB-C. It does the stats, date, time, power draw, all that good stuff with the Lamborghini font. All right. And let's come to the back here. So in the back, as I stated previously, I tried to go for, oh, that's really bright. I tried to go for that taillight look, which obviously didn't get all the way. But like I said, this is kind of inspired by the Lamborghini Huracan taillight. I know the real taillight has a curve to it, and it's slightly different shape down over here. But like I said, I tried to draw from the aesthetic, not directly copy it, right? Sometimes it's actually hard to copy something like that because it's also curved in a certain way. And to make it out of something that's clear is not exactly easy unless you have the mold and all that stuff. But with that said, this is what this is. Just to kind of give it like a rear taillight look. But I also wanted to make it functional, which is why it's holding the screen. So that pretty much wraps up, oh, the bottom, the PSU cover. That is the version 3. Version 2 was hydro dipped and came out terribly. It's actually very hard to hydro dip kind of odd-shaped items, especially ones with insides, unless you have a lot of experience doing so, which I do not. So it is therefore carbon fiber wrapped to the best of my ability. All right. The reason why it's not shiny carbon fiber, because I actually made one out of carbon fiber that's pretty shiny and it looked terrible. So it's kind of satin, right? So which kind of balances out okay. So that's the PSU support and the PSU cover. Oh yes, almost forgot. I don't know how well you guys are going to be able to see this on camera. Inside there, maybe I have to zoom in a little bit. 1 second. So inside there, you have the distro with the STO light. And inside there, there's a vent I've shown you guys in part 1 and 2. It's really hard to see on camera because it's so dark in that corner. You kind of have to see it in person. So that pretty much wraps up everything that I did. I probably skipped over some things and forgot about it. But yeah, it's a shame I couldn't get the top vent thing done the way I wanted. But, you know, with time constraints, it is what it is. But I do want to give a couple closing words about working with this case. As I've said before, I personally wouldn't recommend this case unless you really like the way it looks. Reason being is there's just too many compromises for the price point. Okay, but also one more compromise I learned on the way is that the rad width. These are Alphacool HPE rads, and they just fit out the box. So the moment I powder coated them, they wouldn't even slide anymore. So essentially, I had to add the brackets, screw down the brackets, then screw the bracket onto the frame. So if you're using like EK radiators, it's not going to fit at all. So keep that in mind. Rad width is one thing. Other than that, if you're going to take it apart, be careful not to scratch the carbon fiber rails. They scratch really easily, and there's adhesive, and these things, they have a lot of adhesive on them. So when you're taking it apart, be very gentle, because if you move this thing at a wrong angle, you're going to scratch the coating, the clear coat on the resin layer on the bars. But it is touch and go. Wire management is just non-existent, so you're just gonna have to use zip ties and just make it to the best of your ability. What else? I do want to bring up the thing about Alphacool fittings. Okay, so Alphacool, thank you for sponsoring and being part of this project. However, your fittings are terrible. With that said, I would not recommend anybody use Alphacool fittings. They're extremely loose. And some of these offsets, not offsets, some of these double roll trays, I'm binning fittings for non-leaking ones. It's not something I'd recommend. And the Pro fittings is not a design that I would recommend either. And I want to show you guys why. I don't know how well this is going to come across on camera, but if you ever look at a diagram of the fitting or something on their website, you'll see what I'm saying. So this is the Alphacool Pro fitting. Okay, now the way this works is you unscrew it. Hope you guys can see this. And there's a collar inside, and this collar slides onto the tube, and then you put this at the edge of the tube, and then obviously this collar's over it, and you put it together, and then you screw it in, and as you screw it on, it creates the seal. Now, this thing is absolutely useless, because technically there is an O-ring at the bottom, very bottom depth. There's an O-ring in this fitting. The tube has to pass that O-ring. If you're just putting the tube, if you line this end of the rubber collar to the end of your tube, it will leak slowly or very quickly. But yes, so you need to go past that, because if you actually put the tube on, you slide it on, you turn it all the way, you'll see that you're probably about 3 or 4 millimeters past this collar. So if you're cutting tubing, make sure it's 3 or 4 millimeters past this collar so that it can sit all the way past that O-ring on the inside. And if you don't, it's going to leak extremely slowly and leak faster over time, and it is really annoying. So I discovered that the hard way after dealing with this just unexplainable leaking through these fittings. And I didn't know what was leaking. I didn't know if it was rotary. I didn't know if it was my distro, which I tested everything individually. So I didn't understand what the hell was leaking. And it was leaking so slowly. It was just driving me nuts. And I've had experiences with other folks telling me about the Alphacool fittings being leaky. And so I thought it was a double row trays, and I went through so many of them. And I tested each fitting almost separately. It was just insane. And then I said, you know what? Is it these tube fittings? And I swapped every tube fitting for a different brand fitting, and the leak stopped immediately. All the leaking stopped. So then I realized it was the tube fittings. So because of this rubber collar, it's kind of tall, you also get the world's largest compression collar on top of that. Not the largest, but you get the idea. So you end up with this super bulky fitting that didn't need to be this big and doesn't serve a real purpose. It's not more airtight or leak proof than like a low profile bits power, yet it's just big and just poorly designed, and then the finish comes off extremely easily. It's just, yeah. Anyway, nothing I can say about that's really too nice. So yeah, rads are great, blocks are great, fittings are a nightmare. So that pretty much sums up my opinion on that. For those of you that are going to the Nvidia Lan event or the CES, you can see this at the Nvidia Lan event at the ASUS booth, along with another build I'm doing for ASUS right now. So I gotta rush back to that. And then you'll see this at the Alphacool afterwards. There may be one or more parts I'm gonna install on the day of, because I've been mocking them up and they don't look good, so I haven't put them on. That's why I said two or more things in my Instagram post. But with that said, thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned. I'll try to do a quick clip for the GT502 I'm working on for CES, but that has to go out Friday, and I just don't know if I can manage it. But then again, thanks for watching. Stay safe and take care.